Marcus Tullius Cicero was quite a man. He was a powerful politician in ancient Rome who staunchly defended the Republic through its final decline. It can be argued he is one of the finest lawyers in history, and there's no doubt he has a strong claim to be named mankind's greatest orator. Cicero was also a prolific author and philosopher. Today, I will examine a new translation of one of his most famous and enduring works, De Officii, or in English, On Duties, a guide to conduct, obligations, and decision-making. This translation was completed by a marine and lawyer under the pseudonym Quintus Curtius, and is broken into 3 books, each with its own theme. This book review is broken into 4 parts: content, readability, personal enjoyment, and recommendation. Each has a 1 to 5 star rating. Content. Cicero wrote this book for his son Marcus, who was studying in Greece. This is, in fact, a very lengthy letter that Cicero had every intention of publishing. Marcus had a large allowance, and began to neglect his education, instead drinking too much and perhaps giving in to the temptations all around him. The overall central theme is that no immoral act can ever be expedient, but Cicero tackles an immense number of topics. Many of these topics are addressed using examples his son could easily understand. Today, most of these examples would fly over the head of even someone with an advanced college education. However, the translator has put significant effort in to ensure we understand what Cicero is trying to tell us when using these now obscure references. And once we have an understanding, we begin to see the depth and wisdom of Cicero's words. Here is a fine example. Thus, all who propose to take charge of political affairs should adhere to the following 2 Platonic principles. 1. That they should guard the interests of the citizens in such a way that in everything they do, they place their own interests second to those of the people. And 2. That they care for the people as a whole, rather than favor the interests of one faction over the common good. This tutelage, this management of the affairs of a republic must be carried out for the benefit of those whom such a guardian is tasked with protecting, and not for the benefit of the guardian himself. Those who look after the interests of one part of the population and neglect the other parts introduce a pernicious element in civil affairs, sedition and discord. And from this comes the situation where some favor the masses, and some favor the elites, and few favor the whole. Remember, this is coming from a man who watched his beloved republic fracture into a battleground between 2 parties that did little more than bicker, scheme, and oppose each other until the republic they were fighting over devolved into civil war and endless dictatorships. It is easy to see why the founders of the United States studied Cicero so carefully, and why this new translation is so very necessary today. But this is not just a political tome. Cicero covers justice, friendship, bravery, courage, knowledge, wisdom, judgment, and more. All this in just the first of the 3 books, which Cicero files under moral goodness. Book 2 covers primarily advantageousness, with the 3rd being devoted to what one should do when moral goodness and advantageousness are in conflict. At one time, this book was extremely popular in Europe during the Middle Ages. The translator informs us it was, in fact, the 2nd book printed on the printing press after the Bible, and anyone familiar with Aquinas' Summa Theologica knows the impact it had on early Christians. We are also fortunate to have a translator who made certain to notate with care, provide a detailed table of contents, a full index, and write a preface, an introduction, a short history on the life of Cicero, and a brief commentary on each of the 3 books. Beyond the references that modern readers will struggle to understand, the content is timeless. Add in the extras that add flavor and understanding to the mix, and we have an unbelievable treasure. I rate content 5 out of 5. Readability. Recall earlier in this video I mentioned that the translator is a Marine and lawyer? This is one of the things that makes this particular translation special. Anyone who has a parent who is an attorney knows a lawyer always states his case most carefully and most directly when dealing with a willfully disobedient child. Not that I have any experience with this or anything. What I mean by that is when making an argument, an attorney tends to go into lawyer mode and lay out a case very carefully so that his argument will be successful. Most translators of Cicero do not understand this, so they do the best they can, but ultimately give us a text that is less than what Cicero meant it to be. We need a translator who can not only translate the Latin into English, but can understand how a lawyer puts together an argument. On top of that, while Cicero was not an accomplished soldier, he was someone who dedicated his life to his country, and this is a viewpoint a U.S. Marine can understand. Let me give you an example that encompasses what all the aspects I just spoke of mean. At one point, Cicero states, "Parvi eniam sunt foris arma, nisi est consilium domi," and I apologize for that pronunciation. This generally is translated into something like, "An army abroad is of little use unless there are prudent counsels at home." In this translation, however, this same sentence is structured as, "Arms are of little value abroad unless there is prudent counsel at home." Now you may be saying, that's an awfully small difference, who cares? The answer is, a great orator and attorney does. Every sentence is structured, and word is chosen carefully to provide the greatest impact at the appropriate time. This is part of the rhetoric Cicero excelled at in his orations and his practice of law. The second example is just a bit clearer. The sentence flows slightly better, and most importantly, it is far more accurate. The words use versus value change the content significantly when carefully studying the text. Quintus Curtius has done a masterful job eliminating the run-on sentences, passive voice, and huge blocks of almost unintelligible text that fill so many Latin translations and cause our eyes to glaze over, while simultaneously getting to the heart and the spirit of what Cicero is trying to teach us. He has given us a style that I believe is close to what Cicero would choose if he was our contemporary and not our ancestor. I rate readability 5 out of 5. Personal enjoyment. This category is not about my own personal enjoyment, but that which I believe the average person can expect from this book. Cicero is not the most difficult of philosophers to read, which is a big plus. However, I have concerns about how much effort the average person is willing to put in to obtain the wisdom that saturates this text. Sure, there's a ton of valuable ideas here, but challenging oneself to consider morality versus expediency is not easy for the average individual. Most of us are too distracted or busy to ponder Stoic philosophy. This is the kind of book that needs to be recommended by a trusted friend or mentor. As Quintus Curtius has written in articles about this text, this is a book that is meant to be studied. All the efforts he has gone through to carefully catalog the text, provide footnotes, and organize the table of contents lead us to the inescapable conclusion that this book is meant to be used, not merely read. I want to believe the average person will be willing to do this, but I think the percentage of the population with the desire to look to the past to improve their lives is dwindling. Still, there are a number of people who are interested and willing to put in the effort. To those who sit down to study, they will be rewarded. But I honestly believe too many would put it down after a few pages. Given my beliefs here, I rank personal enjoyment a 3 out of 5. Recommendation. On duties has fallen in popularity from its height in the Middle Ages. A recent review of the Open Syllabus Project demonstrates how far Cicero's work has fallen over the years. Here, we see that on duties ranks as the 3,965th most required course in the U.S., being assigned to only 107 classes. Searching for Diophycii gives us slightly more hope, 3,770th ranked and assigned to 111 classes. Even if we assumed each assignment was mutually exclusive, something I believe is unlikely, we would still only see on duties being taught in 218 college classrooms, which would tie it for 1,442nd overall. Quite a fall from grace from the second book ever in print. Still, many millions of people throughout world history have read these words and taken some of Cicero's advice, including the founders of the United States. Today we have a fascination with Julius Caesar, but in 1776, Cicero and his contemporary Cato the Younger were far more influential, both in the American colonies and in Europe. Given how challenging the political and social climate is today, I believe we could and should be learning from men who lived through similar times. Anyone who studies Cicero's life and reads his letters knows he was a flawed man. This is good. We tend to listen to someone who's made mistakes and had to figure it out the hard way. It's often tough to learn important lessons from a paragon of virtue. In this text, Cicero is doing his best to teach his son what the young Marcus needs to live a good life. Marcus never reached the heights of his father, but he did have a good career for himself. He may well have taken much of the advice dispensed in Diophycii. Moving past the main text, I am compelled to suggest this translation in particular for all of the reasons I mentioned earlier. I reached out to Quintus Curtius and remarked how much work it must have been to put this book together. He indicated it was, quote, a joy and a Herculean labor, end quote. Once you pick up a copy and start reading through it, I think you'll understand. The only personal criticism I have about this book is I didn't care much for the cover. That's really it. I would recommend this book to absolutely anyone with any interest in philosophy, history, or self-improvement. With any luck, this translation will bring a new generation of readers back to one of Western civilization's most important ancestors. I fully recommend this book and rate it 5 out of 5 stars. What's next? My next book review will be SJW's Always Lie, Taking Down the Thought Police by Vox Day. I've been looking forward to this one for some time, and I think you'll enjoy it. I'll probably have this one done within a week or two. In between now and then, I will likely provide some commentary on issues I've seen in the media, and I will probably make a short video on applying leadership lessons. Also, as I was recording this video, I happened across an article by a professor named Donna Zuckerberg, who offered a poorly reasoned critique of Quintus Curtius during a small part of her article. I intend to offer a rebuttal to her argument regarding the translator of today's subject in the near future. Until next time, thanks for listening.